Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we now open the floor for public comments on agenda items. If we have any public comments on agenda items, please feel free to enter those into the chat box and we will read them into the meeting for you. Okay, there being no public comments, we will now move on to presentations.
Okay, we have one presentation this evening, and that is, I'm very happy to announce and pleased to share that we have our first Diamond Award after almost 20 months in person. One of our staff members, Katie Gruniason, has nominated Barb Kosek for a Diamond Award. Katie could not be here tonight, so I'm going to introduce Mr. Preble, who's going to share some of the reasons and speak on behalf of Katie of why she nominated Barb.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma Lewis. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Barb. So Katie Gruniason is a reading specialist at the intermediate school, and she nominated Barb. I'm going to read what Katie had to say, and then I'm going to add to it because she deserves it. Katie wrote that Barb is always so helpful and positive in her interactions with colleagues and students. Recently, Barb was eating lunch with a few students in our classroom. One of the students is having a difficult time. She was extremely compassionate and understanding with the student. She went out of her way to engage the student in conversation and connect with her. We are lucky to have Barb in our district. And what I want to add to that is, Barb's been here as long as I have. She's been here forever. And ever since I came in the door, she has been one of those people that she's beyond staff member. She's superhuman. She is one of the reasons that, given the past 2 years and everything we've all gone through, she's been the glue. She's been the rock for our staff. She's anywhere we need her to be. She's always with a smile on her face. She always comes with solutions. The kids love her because she loves them. So Barb, this is well-deserved, and I appreciate everything that you do for all of us. Oh, we have to take a picture. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Congratulations.
And I just want to share with the board, as the district leadership team already knows, that Barb was one of our learning associates who showed up every day for facilitated distance learning. So that just speaks to truly who she is.
Sure.
All right, and our next presentation is in your board packet is the State of Illinois proclamation to recognizing our principals. So whereas school principals play an integral role in the education and growth of children in elementary, middle, and secondary schools across the state of Illinois, and school principals are responsible for promoting education and building relationships with parents and teachers to ensure that each child receive services that allow them to excel in the classrooms, and it is a primary responsibility of the state of Illinois to preserve and improve resources for school so that all students have access to a quality education and a foundation for a successful future. And educational leaders face many challenges in supporting and educating our young people, and it is through their perseverance and passion that Illinois continues to produce quality career-ready students. And the Illinois Principals Association, which represents over 6,000 educational leaders statewide, believes that learning is a lifelong process and that the education of our children is at the highest priority. And during the 21-22 school year, the Illinois Principal Association will celebrate 50 years dedicated to developing, supporting, and advocating for innovative school leaders. And school principals and learning leaders have faced unprecedented challenges related to COVID-19 during the 2019, 2020, and 2020, 2021 school years, and worked tirelessly to provide uninterrupted learning during an ongoing pandemic. And we must continue to encourage, support, and recognize our school leaders who have a positive impact on Illinois students and the educational system in the land of Lincoln. Therefore, J.B. Pritzker, Governor of the State of Illinois, does hereby proclaim that the week of October 24th through the 30th, 2021, which is next week, as Principals Week, and Friday, October 29th, 2021, as Principals Day in Illinois, to recognize principals for all that they do to help our children learn and succeed. And so we decided to put this in the board packets because we wanted our school leaders to know how much the board and the district leadership team appreciates them on behalf of our community, on behalf of our students and our staff. So thank you for all you do. I think this kind of says it all, and you all know my heartfelt gratitude that I feel for you each day. So thank you for all that you do.
You all. Okay, we are now going to move on to the business agenda for the evening. We have 2 items on the business agenda. Both are up for action. The first one is the omnibus vote agenda. Papers are stuck together. Items under the omnibus vote agenda are considered routine and or non-controversial and will be approved by one motion. If anyone, board member, staff, administrator, or citizen wishes to have a separate vote on any item or items, that item or items will be pulled from the omnibus vote agenda and voted on separately. Be it resolved that the Diamond Lake 76 Board of Education accepts and approves the omnibus vote agenda items A through E as listed. May I have a motion to approve, please? Yes. Okay, that motion passes. Moving on to our second item for action this evening, that's a personnel item. Be it resolved, the Diamond Lake 76 Board of Education accepts and approves the personnel items as depicted on the agenda. We have 2 leaves of absence. May I have a motion to approve, please? Yes. Okay, that concludes our business agenda for this evening. And now we will move on to board discussion. So for board discussion this evening, we have the IASB resolutions for the joint conference, which is held at the end of November. What we're going to do tonight is start discussing the resolutions, and then we will, at the next meeting, either continue discussion depending on whether people have questions or would like to have further discussion. And then we will also vote as a board as to how we will go vote at the delegate meeting. So just to go through a little bit of procedure, essentially these resolutions are the positions IASB takes in terms of lobbying. So, for anyone that's watching the meeting or for anyone that is unfamiliar with this, what happens is that if we vote yes, and then as we go to the delegate meeting and vote yes, and then the majority of the districts also vote yes, then IASB will look towards lobbying for that position. So I just want to make sure that that's clear to everybody. Just because these resolutions pass doesn't necessarily mean the things contained in them will actually happen. So there's 16 resolutions, and then there are a number of position statements that they're reaffirming. So I thought we would start with the resolution and just kind of go through them in numerical order. Like I said, we'll just discuss them tonight, and then at the next meeting, we can vote on them. So we're gonna start with resolution 1. I just forwarded you an email that I received from one of the board members of Avoca District 37, and they are the board that put forth this resolution. So I apologize. I thought that everyone had received that. But if you want additional information, it's contained in that resolution. They put forth this resolution, I believe, at last year's meeting as well, and it didn't pass, and I think they've reworded it. I believe the reason why it didn't pass at the last meeting was because the committee and most of the feedback they got did not think it was specific enough. So I am going to just read the resolution out loud and then we can start our discussion. So it says, be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall advocate for legislation mandating that Illinois State Board of Education require pre-service teachers seeking licensure in the areas listed complete at least one undergraduate level literacy education course solely dedicated to scientifically proven methods of reading instruction. Before being granted licensure in the following areas, individuals must receive a passing score on the most recently published Foundations of Reading exam using cut scores in the formal standard setting process. Licensure areas that should meet these requirements are early childhood education, early childhood special education, elementary education, English language arts, middle grades language arts, reading specialist, reading teacher, special education, speech language pathologist, and English language learner teachers. And the committee did recommend to adopt this resolution. So I'm going to open the floor for discussion. If anyone has any comments or discussion they would like to make. Mhm.
I was gonna say, I mean, it's probably the basic skills test, so this is just one other additional component of that, and I would support this because you would want your teachers to be literate in reading.
When I read this, I also thought that perhaps a college could meet this requirement within I guess my question is just regarding teachers that are getting their certification out of state. That might impact things, but I don't know if this is going to be for higher education in the state or how they would be sure if you're transferring your license from a different state to Illinois, how they must make sure that that is met. I mean, the exams and stuff, yes. But that was my own question, but I still think it.
You want to answer this, Steve, you can, but I was gonna say, usually we have that reciprocity. There are states that have that reciprocity, so that would be fine. And if not, then there's just extra courses that they can take and we can, like a provisionary certificate or something
Yeah.
in the meantime. Did you want to add to that? Okay. Right.
It does say in that, to briefly speak to that, it does say in that email that they sent us from Avoca that 21 states already do this. So perhaps it would already be set up. Mr. Haynes. Oh, and you guys, if you feel comfortable, you can also just remove your mask to speak into the mic too. Okay. Does anyone have any further comment, question, discussion on resolution 1? No. Okay, then we will move on to the student safety and protection plan. This was submitted by Mercer County School District 404. I believe virtually the same resolution has been submitted 3 to 4 times in the past. It reads, be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall support and advocate for legislation which provides local school boards the option of developing student safety and protection plans which allow voluntary district employees in any capacity the ability to carry a concealed firearm on district property, provided the employee has a valid Illinois firearm owner's identification card, holds a certified Illinois concealed carry license, and has completed all additional trainings and certifications set forth by the respective school board, one of which must include yearly certified active shooter training. Only district employees who fulfill all requirements listed and receive superintendent and board approval would be eligible as an active and armed part of the student safety and protection plan. Okay. We received one email comment, and then we also received an email with some additional information from I would say our taxpayers, both of whom asked us not to support this resolution. And then so with that being noted, I'll open the floor for discussion. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, well, I'll just jump in. I think we should vote no for 2 key reasons. One, on the merits of the idea that arming teachers is the way to keep our students safe. As Wayne LaPierre, the NRA, said right after Sandy Hook, the only thing to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Well, I think that that is not the appropriate way to be looking at this. And second, I don't want to see the Illinois State Board of Education put lobbying resources against this and carrying the water for quite frankly, for the gun lobby. This is something that keeps coming up. My only fear is how many people from around the state will be coming to vote this year because of COVID and all of that, since voting is in person. And I've already heard that some districts aren't going to have representatives there because they're not comfortable with COVID. But net, I mean, I could run down a whole litany of reasons why I think this is a poor idea on its merits, and a poor idea for the IASB to be focusing its lobbying efforts on. And this would be, I think, consistent with a couple of the emails we got within the past month.
Yeah, I would agree with you. We've never seen any data that would support this. I feel like we normally try to make decisions within our district based on all of the data available to us, and there's nothing that supports having an armed staff member as making a school more safe or preventing any type of gun-related tragedy.
I mean, all of the, I think, relevant national associations are against this.
Yeah.
So this, the teachers unions, the association that represents school resource officers is against this. I mean, there is no, it doesn't appear to be that there are any educational based entities that are in favor of this.
No.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with John more, but I'd also like to add that the rationale that the district gave that submitted this, basically it sounds like they can't keep a resource officer. So we should all pay now to pass some laws so that people can be armed in every school across the country. It just seems, or across the state. It just seems kind of ridiculous. And the resolution committee, they had, their rationale was also just very strange. It seemed like they didn't want to adopt it, and then I don't even understand it.
And then
Actually,
it just like got messy or something.
yeah, it's like nobody really knew what was going on. But anyways, I definitely think we should vote no on it. And
I mean, their whole thing seems to be about local control.
Yes.
But quite frankly, just because you allow, if you advocate for local control, that's fine. But then there's, you know, good things and things which we should be advocating for as a good choice for a district versus things that seem to be outside of what IASB should be doing.
I agree. I would say that the last time this came up, and then last year at the delegate meeting as well, when local control was discussed, it seems that the delegate assembly or the resolution committee seems to apply local control to what they would like to apply local control to, like that argument. It doesn't always, they don't seem to apply it universally across the board. I do understand, I think it's important for us to understand that, you know, the school districts in Illinois are not homogenous. The communities in Illinois are not homogenous. We all face different challenges. And I think it's important to recognize and respect that. But I think us, you know, saying that we don't support this isn't us saying that we don't support, you know, their need for having different types of solutions than we have. We just don't necessarily feel that this is the best solution. Okay.
Can I just add one thing real quick?
Yeah.
The other thing I just wanted to add was, you know, if that were to happen, John, like where there wasn't enough representation of school districts voting no on this, I would just like suggest that people also contact their elected officials, and you know, I mean, there are other ways around it if it were to pass for some reason.
Right. I'm under the impression that there's also an appeal process if something gets, if something is voted on. So if, for example, if this does get passed, and it's been close votes for a while, if this does get passed, then that could be something that we could look at, which is an appeals process. And I absolutely agree with you about lobbying legislators. Legislators, I'm sorry, about it.
If you guys want additional information, IASB does have a webinar, 2 webinars. One is on November 3rd and one's on November 10th. One's in the evening, one's in the afternoon. That gives you kind of an overview of the delegate assembly. So they will talk through the procedure there, but then they will also have discussion too. So if you want more information, you know, that's a good time to kind of get some more information. Yvonne, I think, did we kind of cut you off?
Does this also include like a retired police officer, an armed retired police officer? Like if we were to hire a retired police officer, is that what, or is that?
I think, well, the distinction they're making is between school resource officer, which I think typically would be what a retired police officer would do, but I don't know the exact definition in the school code. The school code does have a definition for school resource officer, but there's a distinction. They seem to be making the distinction though that they can't find school resource officers or even enough policemen to fulfill, you know, the needs of their community. So to me, it looks like, and based on the discussion I've heard in the past, they're really talking about allowing anyone that works for the district to be armed and not making a distinction as long as you fulfill the requirements that are listed. So it could be a custodian, it could be a teacher, it could be a nurse, it could be an administrative assistant, you know, any of those positions. there's no distinction for just like a resource officer or retired law enforcement.
Well, what it doesn't do is it doesn't go, by voting no, we're not saying that policemen can't be armed. Or, real resource officers. It's the advocating for arming sort of any adult to carry a gun in the school.
Do we have any further discussion on resolution 2? No. Okay. We can certainly continue discussing next meeting as well. Then we will move on to number 3, which I think is always a favorite of ours. School board member compensation. In case anyone's confused, none of us are compensated. We are all volunteers. But this resolution seems to rear its head a lot. There is a similar one, which is resolution 4 that we'll talk about in a second. But the distinction here, or I'll read this one. Be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall support legislation that provides for fair and reasonable compensation for school board members. This compensation shall help relieve the financial burden incurred by Board of Education members so that they can attend school board meetings, board committee meetings held in compliance with the Illinois Open Meetings Act, and for events regarding school district staff and other official school board business not already compensated. So this one, I think, is similar to the next one. The next one has some additional distinctions.
So I would agree here with the resolutions committee, which recommends that we do not adopt this resolution. But I have to say that the district's rationale is compelling. When they're talking about attempting to eliminate the inequitable barriers to democratic service, I think that's a really, really important point. And I actually think their next resolution does a better job of sort of eliminating some of those barriers, but I think their rationale was very compelling to me, I thought. So I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like in previous times that we've discussed this, it's kind of been like, kind of like a, I don't know, we kind of like laugh about it. Like, we don't need compensation to do this. Like, we're here because we want to be here. But like I had a conversation with someone who I asked him like, do you know anyone who would want to run on our board? And he said, every time I ask people that I know, they ask me, how much does it pay? And he says it doesn't pay anything. And they're like, no, I can't,
Right.
So, I mean, it is, I think it's important that we recognize that it's a place of privilege to be able to come and not be compensated for your time or not have, childcare, like in the next resolution, be an obstacle for people. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know that this is the answer, but I do, I like Margaret was saying, I do find like the argument compelling in certain ways that I hadn't thought of 2 years ago when we were discussing it last time. So, yeah.
I'll just jump in real quick. I mean, volunteerism is something that we sort of see everywhere. We should, ideally we see it everywhere. And this is just, being on a school board is a privilege, and it's another type of volunteerism. And there are plenty of other types of volunteerism that by definition aren't compensated either. I don't see why the school board would be selected and highlighted as, from most things you're not compensated, but for this one thing you are compensated. And I understand, we don't want to have barriers in the way of people who really want to doing it. Would hate to think that money would be a reason to do it. If for any reason that this was passed. Didn't mind, for example, so much the ideas about some type of childcare coverage or something, which we'll talk about on the next resolution. But the general sort of blanket school board member compensation is, where does that end? I mean,
Right.
we're sort of doing this for a reason this way.
Well, I certainly understand the desire to remove barriers for people to serve. I don't think that compensation solves a lot of those barriers. And, if a person can't take time off from work in order to attend the meetings, compensating them for coming to the meeting doesn't solve that. If the employer, without some other level of intervention there, where you're requiring an employer to give release days for such service like they're required to do for National Guard service, then, for many of those people who are working second shift, that's not going to solve their problem just because they're suddenly compensated as a board member.
Yeah, I would agree with what Nicole and Margaret said, that I think that the rationale this time that we're seeing the resolution is really important. I think it's important for us to realize that there is a lot of inequity within, the various communities in Illinois, and that certain people have the opportunity to be able to volunteer, or, have the means to be able to take time off, or to have someone take care of their children and things like that. Personally, I just didn't think that this resolution was specific enough to address the issue. And I think that goes to what Dave and John said as well. Because I think for part of it, you would have to have a partnership between the board and trying to, figure out a meeting schedule or accommodate people as well. But I do think that we can discuss the next resolution shortly, but I do think that was more specific and made more sense to me.
I'll just add that when I read it, all the things that were mentioned, and what really stuck with me was the idea of a potential conflict of interest. I just feel like whenever you start dealing with people in positions of decision making, and these we're doing this for our community, and when you start adding in compensation, it feels like it gets a little sticky. So I agree with everybody, and that was something that I sort of stuck with me as well and didn't feel right.
Okay, do we have any more discussion? No? Okay. So then the next resolution, which we've all been alluding to, is the board member childcare reimbursement. And it says, be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall support and advocate for legislation that allows for board members to be reimbursed for childcare costs as a result of participation in board meetings. Removing barriers to increase access and participation of potential board members is core to the mission of IASB. So this one to me, the rationale is similar, but this one to me was specific enough that it made sense. And I to me, it made some inroads in helping to try to kind of level the playing field and allow people that wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to volunteer if they wanted to be able to do that.
My only question on this one would be like, how would this actually work? I would think that like a lot of people who do have childcare for like night meetings, it would be like a family member or a neighbor, or not necessarily like a daycare or something that comes
Sure.
with like documentation. Right. Or yeah, babysitter, right. But like that would I mean, you know, I guess I would be curious as to how it would work, but
No, I mean, my assumption would be, it would be similar to just the regular school board reimbursement policies that you could have X amount of dollars to reimburse you for whatever. But I don't know. They're not, it's not specific. To me, this was more specific though than the kind of broad stroke saying, just reimburse you for being on the school board, because that to me, it didn't say, for time missed work, or like it didn't enumerate the different reasons why you might need reimbursement in the resolution itself.
I thought it was a really clever point that they made, that, part of this is to ensure that our own children are being safely and properly taken care of while we're advocating for the children of the community.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I also thought that the fact that they added in that the child care and dependent family member care reimbursement went into law, because this is a, governmental duty, and it would fall under that. So their thoughts about it are based in law. So it seems to me like it would have a, absolutely would qualify under this law.
Okay. Does anyone have any further comment for that one? Okay, now we can move forward to one I think is pretty easy. The remote virtual school board open meetings. Be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall urge the Illinois General Assembly to pass legislation to allow school boards and committees of school boards, subject to the Illinois Open Meetings Act, to allow open or closed meetings to be conducted via audio or video conference without the physical presence of a quorum of the members, so long as provisions are included addressing verification of members present with full access and participation in the meeting, providing that public members attending in person at the location can observe all votes and discussion of the body, providing certain personnel are present at the posted meeting location, addressing the process for how votes are conducted to guarantee identification and proper recording, providing appropriate notice to news media and public regarding time, location, and methods of participation, providing appropriate verbatim record and recordings of meetings are maintained and provided to the public, to remove restricting remote participation to only times of personal illness, disability, employment, or family emergency. So to me, this seems very much like how we've all operated during the pandemic, and it would make sense to make it permanent. I do think that it's funny that this is recommended to be adopted while IASB isn't allowing the delegates to vote virtually, but to me, this makes a lot of sense, and I think would be, very timely to adopt.
Great idea. Yes.
and it kind of seems like it might also help address some of those inequities
Yeah,
that we
exactly.
are concerned about. So if people could do it from their own home, that might entice more people to get involved.
That's a very good point.
And I think just based on our community response too, I think we've had very positive
Yes.
feedback. And I don't see why we would stop.
Okay, does anyone else have anything to add there? No, okay. Okay, the next one, reorganize board from 28 to 40 days. Be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall support legislation to change the legal requirement of reorganizing a newly elected Board of Education from within 28 days to from within 40 days of the election. So just so everybody knows, in case there's any confusion, is that once the election results are certified, the school board has 28 days to seat the new members. It sounds like they're saying that for some boards that's hard because they have to call special meetings. I mean, to me, personally, I don't think it matters, yes or no. The thing I thought was strange was it's not a surprise when the election happens. And so I don't know why that just wouldn't be built into the board meeting calendar on a biannual basis. But
Yeah, I think one of the points they were making is with different ways to vote now, it's taking longer and longer to
Sure.
finalize the vote. But if, in my opinion, if districts need a little more time,
right, why not?
yeah, why not?
Any other comment on that one? Okay, moving on to Indigenous people curriculum inclusion. Be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall support legislation to include the study of Native Americans / Indigenous people for social studies content and U.S. history.
To be honest, I'm surprised it doesn't already include that.
It seems like it's not a current requirement. Maybe some schools already include it, but this would make it across the board, I would think, or that would hopefully be the end result. But yeah.
The only thing I noticed in this particular resolution was that it was not very specific. It was specific in, Native American Indigenous people, but, if we're talking K through 12, how, to me, it seemed a little bit vague as far as where would this fall. Obviously, it would only be the support of legislation that would do this, which I think, is a good idea. But I was just looking at sort of what their thoughts would be on what the specifics would be. And I didn't really see that. I just sort of saw a blanket statement. But Nikki, I thought the same thing. Like, I sort of assumed that it was already part. I mean, being in the state of Illinois, I know we have a lot of state approved curriculum that already have all that in there. So I was sort of surprised it wasn't included officially.
Okay, any other comments? Nope. Okay, moving on to the science of reading curriculum. This one is similar to the first resolution we already discussed. This one is recommended is do not adopt by the committee. The resolution reads, be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall urge the adoption of legislation that all elementary schools in Illinois will use the science of reading in their K through 5 grade level curriculum, including in-depth phonemic education to teach each student proficient reading skills that include reading comprehension, fluency, and vocabulary acquisition, and that the IASB urge policymakers and legislators to allocate funding for teacher professional development for a minimum of 2 years to support teachers and learning how to teach the science of reading through phonics. So it looks like the difference here, and this is what the resolution committee talks about, is the first one mandates education before you're actually a teacher, and this one mandates the professional development once you are already working, and a change to curriculum.
Without funding.
Yeah, without funding.
Okay, so my question here, the science of reading in quotations there in caps, is that, I mean, first letter capitalized, is that a specific program like Wilson or like, are they advocating for the use of a particular product in school curricula?
And I don't know if I can speak to that, but that's what I just made a comment of like, they're asking you to do this specifically without providing the funds to do so.
Yeah, because I mean that. I don't.
And the professional
Dr. Taraka,
development.
You know, that is a.
And the professional development.
Right.
So it's not only
So-
doing this program or doing this approach to the program, but then you have to provide the 2 years of professional development along with the other initiatives that we have going on. So
And
without providing the dollars to do so.
yeah, the committee is recommending not to adopt and based partly on the lack of flexibility that the language gives.
Mhm.
Um, I would agree with that, especially if this is a specific program, then you're
doesn't look like
handcuffing
it
every
is.
district to the other one is saying research-based or something like that, which that gives you flexibility because there are many research-based approaches. Whereas if they're advocating one particular approach, then I would disagree with this one too.
Yeah, it doesn't, and I just did a quick Google search. It doesn't look like the science of reading is actually like a program. It's just referring to actually the research done on the science of reading. So,
And including, like comprehension, fluency,
Mhm.
vocabulary acquisition, like making sure those components are in the teaching of it.
okay, any further discussion? Okay, moving on to 9, which is health and sex education curriculum. Be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall support and advocate for local school district control of content and curriculum for health and sex education courses offered in their district. This looks like it's in response to a Senate bill that was passed by the House and the Senate in Illinois, but it also has already been signed into law by Governor Pritzker back in August. So to me, it seems moot, as this is already a law, and I don't really understand why they're bringing forth the resolution now after the law is passed, as opposed to prior to it, so that they could actually lobby for a change if they wanted to.
So my thoughts on this is that, yes, the law's already been enacted. It's been signed by Pritzker. It's written almost as if it's this district's interest to, like, their desire to bypass
Mhm.
that. And I don't see a reason to support funding on lobbying for that.
It's that same
It's already-
district that from the second resolution,
Yeah.
Mercer.
Yeah, and quite frankly, the fact that the resolutions committee is supporting this, my personal opinion is unconscionable. I mean, the fact that you could decide what parts of health and sex education are appropriate for your community, I mean, that just, we as a state should be better than that. And providing accurate, comprehensive, thorough approach to health and sex education, I think is the way to go. And to provide the ability for a district to say, no, that's, we're not comfortable with that sex stuff is absolutely ridiculous. And it really makes me question the resolutions committee when we see things that they're advocating to adopt this, to adopt number 2. Some of the things I agree with, but then they come, some of these are much, much bigger issues.
Yeah.
And this is one that I see as a quite a big issue. And my vote would be against adopting.
Yeah, I read the Senate bill after reading through this resolution, just to see what it said and to see if there was something that stood out to me as to why it would be problematic. And it seems very general. It seems like most curriculums would probably fall under that or would require some tweaks. So I don't really understand why. I mean, I would like to know what is so special about their curriculum that doesn't meet the standards of this bill.
It just appears that
Yeah.
this district appears to advocate certain very conservative policies that go way beyond what IASB should be lobbying for. There seems to be a consistency in the Mercer County School District. And this one just rankles me personally.
I think too, the focus on the fact that this has already been signed into law.
Right.
I mean, take out the fact of this somewhat controversial topic for some. It's already this, I wouldn't want to see IASB put time and money towards this when there are other more pressing things. No matter how anybody feels about it personally, John, I agree with you, but it's already done.
Right.
So it seems like let's focus our efforts on things that we can have an impact on, rather than things that you're talking about, the changing of a word, which hasn't happened. They're just concerned that it might happen. And if it were to happen, there would need to be changes to the law anyway. So that's was my big thought on it, was just why focus on something that's already done for now.
Right. I thought it was strange that they didn't include in the rationale that this is actually a signed law, because that happened before this came out, which to me is problematic. But like I said earlier, when I seen the resolutions committee discuss the resolutions, they like local control, but they pick and choose where they want to apply it to. And this resolution and resolution 2 are 2 examples of how they do that. Okay. Does anyone have any other comments on this resolution? Okay, well, we have an interesting one next. Cannabis sales. Be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall introduce and support legislation that would allocate 20% of state tax revenues from cannabis sales to public education programs that support youth development, violence prevention, and health education. These funds shall be divided equitably across the state based on disproportionately impacted area maps that determine the R3 funding. Okay. And yeah, I mean, this is interesting. Basically, the rationale is that the Board of Education has a vested interest in ensuring that the district's programming needs are fully funded. And Illinois has had a large amount of revenue from cannabis sales. So, does anyone have any comments?
And that one, I have no problem with IASB advocating to get more money for education out of this source of revenue.
Does anyone have any other comments on that?
My only thought was in the committee's rationale was just the importance of, should this come to be, that this additional funding would be a supplemental, but not a supplemental income for districts, and not necessarily replace current funding. That was the only thing that I was thinking is, would this be somehow used as a way to shift funding? So really, ultimately, there isn't any gain. It's just sort of, oh, now it comes from this rather than this. But that was my only question about it. Thought.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's not clear. Okay. Any other discussion on that?
I guess my fear is that this lead to a new marketing campaign by dispensaries that help fund education.
Yeah,
Come
good.
get this stuff. Yeah, I
Support our schools.
it's
Yeah.
right. Support our, right, like, they have that
PTO
sign up
fundraiser,
front.
the dispensary.
Something just seems twisted about.
There seems like a
yeah.
conflict,
Yes.
there.
Yes.
at least in messaging, between what your school would message and what that message would be.
Yes, right. I mean, Just Say No Week, sponsored by. whatever the name is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I mean, I don't know, something just.
I mean, you could look at it exactly the opposite way too and say, hey, this is a way to get funding to, prevent, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right, well, I mean, what's next? Then you take money seized from drug dealers.
Hey,
and
money's
right,
money.
right,
Pays
but
the
I don't know,
bills.
just something seems wrong.
Keep the lights on.
Okay, does anyone else have any comments on that one? It is interesting. I'm surprised we haven't seen it sooner. Okay, the next three are interesting. I don't recall seeing any that requested like federal lobbying before, but these three all do. The first one is the clean energy infrastructure federal funding. Be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall urge the Congress of the United States to provide federal funding to school districts for clean energy infrastructure, including but not limited to solar panels, geothermal heating, and cooling, and wind turbines. They recommend do not adopt because many districts already have clean energy projects ongoing.
Which was not a very compelling reason to me. It doesn't even seem like a reason. That seemed, that was strange. I don't see why not. I mean, I personally like I personally like this idea, and I think this district consistently has very innovative ideas. I'm assuming it's coming out of like the university town. I support it.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like like what Margaret was saying, like the arguments against it are, that not everyone's going to benefit from it because they're already doing it, but it's a silly reason not to do something. I mean, we're all going to benefit from clean energy,
Any other comments? Okay, now electric school buses and charging stations, federal funding. Be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall urge the Congress of the United States to provide federal funding to school districts for clean electric school buses and charging stations.
Is that a thing? Meaning, are there electric school buses out there?
I'm sure there are, we don't have many.
Right. No, definitely.
There are definitely electric commuter buses. Those are relatively. There definitely are electric commuter buses in the more major metropolitan areas, but that's probably a fairly new technology. I'd say the last 5 years or so.
It looks like there are electric school buses. I just don't know what the availability would be of them. But it obviously seems very new.
Would that not also be addressed in number 11 with clean energy infrastructure? I mean,
I think there's just I think that due to the wording of that, it would not be addressed. It looks like though, and I'm just Googling to see if the buses existed. But according to the Wall Street Journal, the infrastructure bill that's currently in Congress includes $5 billion to help public and private schools buy electric and low emission buses already. So perhaps this is kind of a moot issue.
Or you just continue to support
True.
more focus and you consolidate the support in this area. I mean, to me, clean energy, electric buses, this is the future. And it's right around the corner. Like, it's not 10, 20 years down the line. I mean, this is happening very quickly. To me, it makes sense that we would start lobbying for these fundings now, so that school districts can prepare for what's coming. I mean, we know how quickly Congress acts, so I mean, let's start now.
I guess actually, I'm looking further at this article. I guess actually there is a plant in Chicago that's building these buses. So, I mean, that seems like it would be a good idea for Illinois to support because it would just bring more jobs here as well.
And looking at the rationale, it seems like, you know, the acknowledgement that, you know, you do have rural communities where a bus might be going a tremendous distance.
Yeah, you couldn't.
But to me, that doesn't seem like a justification for not supporting something that would give funding to a school if they were within the capacity to use it.
Sure.
So that seemed a little strange to me, that they would focus on the fact that not all districts, that it would be feasible for all districts, but there's lots of things that aren't necessarily feasible for any specific district, and that doesn't necessarily mean it isn't overall a good idea to even pursue.
Sure.
So.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, moving on to landscaping federal funding. Under the rationale, it looks like there's an amended language provided. There's amended language provided, so I'm going to read that. Be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall urge the Congress of the United States to provide federal funding to the school districts for landscaping and infrastructure improvements to mitigate the effects of environmental problems. These may include, but not limited to, rain gardens, pollinator gardens, stormwater detention areas, trees and perennial plants whose root structure can help soil erosion, and sidewalk, bike paths, and covered bike parking to encourage students and staff to use active transportation to get to school. They are recommending to adopt that. I think that the title of that resolution is misleading.
It does seem that the resolutions committee is sort of throwing a bone at the most opaque one of the three, of the three environmental resolutions. They're saying no to clean energy, okay, no to electric buses, okay, and yes to landscaping. It just seems like I don't feel compelled for us to follow the guidance of the resolutions committee
Sure.
if we don't want to. This one seems awfully, now I understand these are all just directional.
Sure.
I get that, but this one seems awfully vague, like remarkably vague compared to sort of everything else in the set of resolutions. But I'm not against it, just
hence the resolutions committee.
Yeah, how do we get more people on the resolutions committee?
I don't know exactly how the structure is determined, but it looks like there's one person from each area because there's a member
Mhm.
from Lake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, does anyone else have any comments on this one? My only comment would be I would wonder how this would overlap with local government already looking at some of these issues because, flooding in a school district, Mundelein has a lot of flooding issues, but they aren't necessarily caused by the school build. It's a more complicated problem than that. So I don't know how federal funding just directed for the school would necessarily solve that problem. Okay, moving on, we're almost done. So with these, moving on to legislative activities, expanding broadband internet access. Be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall actively present, support, and advocate for legislation that expands broadband internet access for families across the state of Illinois. I think the pandemic has shown us how important this is. I know that especially early on in the pandemic, there were many school districts, especially in Southern Illinois, larger rural districts, where students did not have access to online learning, where they did not have access to computers because they didn't have access. Even if they had the computer, they didn't have access to the internet. And so those districts were photocopying, all sorts of work for students. Students were just taking packets home of material. To me, expanding this, I think, is really important and a good way to try to add some equity in education and make sure that everyone has access to the tools they need. And I think, as we've seen through the pandemic, virtual learning or online learning is not going to go away. And so if this could support all of the students in the state, I think that would be a really important thing to do. Any other comments on that one? Okay. Then the next one is the child safe gun storage. And this was submitted last year, and I believe the language is exactly the same as it was last year. Be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall support and advocate for legislation which strengthens child safe gun storage laws in the state of Illinois, requiring gun owners to store firearms, whether they are loaded or unloaded, in a securely locked container if a person under the age of 18 is likely to gain access to the weapon without permission. The resolutions committee rationale in do not adopt here is the same as the rationale that they gave the previous year, which was just, again, to me, it kind of hits local control, but they don't think schools have a place in people's homes. I will say that in going to the delegate meeting last year, there were a number of arguments, which I agree with, where different districts said schools are very much involved in people's homes. We provide free meals to people. During the pandemic, we were bringing meals to people's homes. If children have a need at home, if they need coats, if they need beds, the school district definitely works to help people. They work to be partners with families. They work to help parents. They work to build this community partnership. So to say that there's no precedent for schools to be involved in homes just isn't true. So I would say, we saw, I think there was a shooting yesterday in Chicago between an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old that I don't remember who shot who, but one of the children got a hold of a gun and shot the other one. We see things like this every day. It's terrible. I don't understand why, as a school district, when one of our biggest priorities is making sure all of our students are safe, why we wouldn't advocate something like this.
I think it's ironic that the committee recommends that teachers and school staff carry loaded weapons, but recommends you not advocate for storing those weapons safely in a home with minor children.
I agree entirely. I also think, to build on that, I think it's ironic how the resolution committee has no problem allowing districts to decide what they're comfortable or not comfortable sharing with students in the areas of health and sex education. But God forbid, we should ask anybody in our community to lock up their firearms when there are children around. This seems to be very straightforward. I agree with you guys. We're part of the community. This is a standing issue. Over 90% of gun owners are in favor of this. So this isn't a Second Amendment issue. This is just more of a public safety issue.
To add on to that, I think that whether or not this passes, you know, it was saying that the current law dictates that you have to have safe storage for children up to 15, and this changes it to up to 18. So whether or not this, you know, is supported, if it's something that you support, I would also recommend contacting your legislators and letting them know that you do support it, because we don't necessarily need IASB to do this. I mean, it's great if we can get that money behind it and get that support behind it, but you know, each of us has our own voice, and we could make this happen on our own too. So I just would like to add that.
Okay. Does anyone else have any comments on that one? Okay. The last new resolution is school code review. This is also submitted by that Champaign district that had the 3 federal funding, or no, 2 of the federal funding ones, right?
I think
All 3. Okay, all 3. So they say, be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall lobby the Illinois State Board of Education to complete an in-depth review of the school code and make recommendations for systemic education change to the General Assembly. This task force shall be representative of student demographics and needs, specifically including race, socioeconomic status, special education, and English language learners. The goal shall be to provide recommendations to change sections of the Illinois school code that disproportionately harm students of protected classes while unfairly benefiting advantaged students. I don't really see how you'd be against this.
I mean, I love this language, but it's also extremely broad.
Yeah.
And it's kind of confusing, like, yes, like 100% we support this, but what are you exactly proposing to enact or proposing to recommend that the General Assembly enact? So I think, I mean, I personally would like to support the resolution because I think it's a great idea in theory, but maybe we need more information on where and what the specifics are of what they want to do with this general
I would agree
language.
with Mrs. Kwan, and even their rationale. I mean, yeah, it says student discipline, mandatory drills, but it doesn't. It just says those things. It doesn't say what about them is impacting, you know, disproportionately harming students of protected classes. I think it would be a better rationale if the examples were more specific. So I agree that it's very generally stated, and more information would be much more helpful to make a decision on this one.
Any other comments on this one? Okay, then I think we're going to stop at the resolutions for tonight. I'm sure that our leadership team is very happy that this portion of the meeting is over. We will pick up at the next meeting, going through the amending the existing positions and the reaffirmation of existing positions. Those, I believe that the delegates vote on like a slate, so they don't even discuss them. So Most of them do not look any different than what we've seen in previous years, just to give you that information. Okay, that wraps up board discussion. We had 2 FOIA requests. They were both fulfilled. Notices and communications. As usual, we have our board meeting calendar. If you know in advance you cannot attend a board meeting, please let myself, Bhavna, know about that so that we can make sure that, we let Lisa know when we have quorum. And then we have happy news. Congratulations to our recent master's graduates. It's a great picture that's included of Miss Enriquez, Miss Lozano, Miss Riley, and Mrs. Rastrelli. So congratulations to them. What a happy occasion. And then, okay, then moving on to public comments and petitions on non-agenda items. Do you have any public comments and petitions on non-agenda items this evening? And those can just be entered into the chat box and we can read them into the meeting for you. I'm not seeing any. Okay. Do you have any others this evening? No? Okay, then we will make a motion to adjourn to executive session for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee or against legal counsel for the district to determine its validity. May I have a motion to adjourn to executive session, please?
Moved. Ms. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Candela?
Yes.
Ms. Angarola? Ms. Bayless?
Yes.
Ms. Hale?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman? Ms. Kwan? Yes.